Today, I'm reviewing the Hidizs MK12 single dynamic driver in-ear monitor. There's a few special things about this IEM. First of all, the design was inspired by a jellyfish. Yes, you heard that right, a jellyfish. And we've got a special diaphragm in here as well. Anyway, we'll get into all that. Let's get it. What's cracking, audio fans? It's David here from Prime Audio Reviews. That is the box for the Turris. Not a lot to look at there. Inside, unfortunately, there is no carrying case, but I'm neither here nor there about that. There is a carrying or a storage pouch, but no case as such. But have a look at these. Have a look at these. Very unique, right? I think it might be a bit divisive. You're gonna probably love them or hate them. I love them. I'm in the love them camp for this one. These shells feel fabulous, and the build quality is really outstanding. By the way, let's talk about the pricing before I get into it and get myself confused. So these are going on sale tomorrow, which is the 10th of June. They will be available on Kickstarter. Now, if you get in early, if you get in on the early bird deal, you can pick these up for just $129 US. The MSRP or the standard price will be $199. Now, the driver inside is rather special. It is a 12mm driver, so right off the bat, it's a large one. You've got physics on your side right from the get-go, so 12mm large, but what's interesting about it, it's 91% pure magnesium. Now, we have seen magnesium diaphragms before, but usually they're reserved for flagship IEMs or ones that are priced in the thousands of dollars. Somehow, Hidizs have made an IEM with an affordable price tag and that magnesium technology. And what that supposedly does, the magnesium gives you more rigidity. It gives you a wider frequency range, like 10 hertz to 45 kilohertz. That's very impressive. If you don't know the numbers, don't worry about it. It just means really, really good coverage of the different frequencies. But at the end of the day, I guess it comes down to the tuning and the acoustic chamber and how it fits in your ears and, many things. So let's talk about the fit. They do look a little bit unusual and awkward, but let me tell you, these are super, super comfortable. I actually love wearing these in my ears. They just fit my ears perfectly. Every now and then I get an IEM that just seems like it was custom built for my ears, and not only are they super comfortable, but they have fantastic passive noise isolation too. Let's have a quick look at the cable now, and it is fairly standard, fairly generic, nothing great, nothing terrible about it. It handles nicely. Anyway, it is a good cable. Trust me on that one. Now, the Hidizs MK12 also comes with 3 pairs of tuning filters. You've got the rose gold, or the balanced, I think it's called, and then you've got silver, which is your treble filters, and then you've got red, which is your warm, sort of bassy filter. And I ended up spending most of my time with the rose gold ones. I found that to be the best balance of energy and comfort when it comes to sound signature. And speaking of sound signature, let's dive right in, starting with the graph. And you might get a bit of a shock by looking at that. I know I certainly did, because like with just about everything that I test, I listen first and I don't measure until a couple of days later. So I started listening to the MK12 here, and I was intrigued right away, quite interested, quite impressed with the sound quality. And then when I measured it and looked at the graph, I thought, oh my gosh, are you serious? I'm liking that? Because it does look a bit awkward, doesn't it? It looks those peaks in the upper treble, the upper mid-range, and the lower treble, I should say, they look pretty outrageous. And when I saw that, I had to go back and listen again and say, am I really liking the sound of that? Turns out I do. And I apologize, I am rambling quite a lot today. So The rose gold and the silver filters, not a whole lot of difference between those. You could almost toss a coin and get the same result between those. The red one, however, is distinctly different, and the red one just, it doesn't boost the bass. What it does, it actually pulls the upper mid-range and the lower treble down, so the perceived level of bass is higher. But I found it went a bit too far in that direction, and it ends up just being a little bit too heavy and thick in the bass. So that's a good segue into the bass. And yeah, the MK12, very impressive bass response. It's rather unique. First of all, it's very authoritative. It's very punchy. It's got great impact. It's got lovely texture. The texture is amazing. Actually, the quality of the bass, at least with the silver and the rose gold filters, the bass is outstanding. Really, really high quality stuff. It's definitely north of neutral. I wouldn't quite call it a bass head IEM, although it's bordering on that line. But it just sort of gives you this sense of so much power without being overpowering, if you know what I mean. And that magnesium driver is nice and speedy and snappy enough so that the bass notes, the decay on bass notes is nice and fast, so it doesn't get caught up and doesn't trip over its own low end. But let's talk about the mid-range now. And the mid-range is, wow, it's really up front. It's sort of, it grabs you by the collar of your shirt and it pulls you in, and yeah, it gets right up in your face. Some people might find that a bit uncomfortable. Personally, I find it rather exciting. I like the way it does that. So vocals are really forward and up front in the mix, alongside that nice, healthy, boosted bass as well. But in fact, the whole frequency spectrum from the lowest bass to the highest highs is all up there. It's all up in your face. It's all forward. So it's a really exciting listen. Some people might find it fatiguing. Even I do. I wouldn't say I find it fatiguing, but I do need to take a break after maybe a couple of hours, or even just do some low volume listening for a little while just to get my brain reset, because it is quite demanding on the listener. It throws a lot of sonic information into your brain, and it certainly has a bit of a wow effect to it. And then there is the treble. So yeah, the lower treble is pretty energetic, but somehow they've managed to avoid any sibilance, so I don't find the sibilant, even on poorly recorded tracks. It's not a problem for me. The treble note size is nice. It's not too thin. It's not too warm or thick, but it sounds fairly natural. It sounds very smooth. It is, in terms of detail retrieval, these are pretty good. I would say not class leading, but detail retrieval is definitely on par with other IEMs in this price range, well, anywhere between $100 and $200. The detail retrieval is quite impressive. Not so much with the red filter, but with the rose gold and the silver, yes. Now that treble energy does give you a reasonably wide stage, and because of the depth and the overall resolution, there's good stage depth as well, like forward depth. So not only does the sound spread out wide from left to right, but it goes in front of you and behind you, which in turn facilitates pretty good spatial imaging. So, you know, people use that term 3D holographic, where you can sort of imagine the position of different sounds, instruments, and vocals within the space around you. So yeah, to summarize, the Hidizs MK12, really upfront, very energetic, very engaging, quite unusual, but I think it works. I think it works quite well. Now let's do a couple of comparisons. I'll start with the Moondrop Cadence, which is, I think from memory, about $189. Now the Cadence here, I'm not a huge fan of. I enjoyed the original Kato more than this one. This one, I find the bass just a little bit on the lean side, although I do like the linear transition from the sub bass to the mid bass, but it's really the presence region, that 3 to 4 or 3 to 5 kilohertz region that's lifted on the Cadence, that I do find personally a little bit shouty and grating. And although the MK12 has sort of boosted frequencies in that same region, it has the bass weight to counterbalance it. So I think it works better, at least for my ears. The cadence has slightly better detail retrieval though, and I would say probably a more spacious soundstage, but the overall resolution is better, I think, on the MK12. Okay, next up, let's look at the Kiwi Ears KE4, the new meta tuning. So the KE4 has a bit more emphasis on the lowest of the lows, or the sub bass, but that is offset somewhat by a more extended, less rolled off treble, upper treble that is. The KE4, I would say, probably slightly better detail retrieval than the MK12, despite having that extra sub bass, but the mid-range on the KE4 sometimes comes across as a little bit dry. And that's probably mostly due to the way the treble is tuned as well. Like that upper treble lift kind of just gives everything in the mid-range leaner note size. So you've got very snappy transients, but I don't think it's quite as resolving again. Actually, they're pretty close in terms of resolution, these two earphones. I do like them both. If I were to pick a daily driver, you know what? I'd actually be happy with either one. The Turris, I'm not sure why I don't find it fatiguing. I don't. Like I said, sometimes I need to maybe just turn the volume down a bit or take a short break, but listening track by track, it doesn't grate on me in the least. But these are both good IEMs. So coming back to the MK12 Turris from Hidizs, first of all, these look so cool. If you are worried about how they look, well, I can't relate to that because, you know, I really don't care. As long as something sounds good, I'll stick it in my ears and walk through town. I don't care. But I actually like the look of these. They kind of look a bit alien to me, something out of Predator. But like I said, in terms of comfort, they are fantastic, and the passive noise isolation is well above average too. So, should you get these? Do I recommend them? Well, you have to take things into consideration. So, very dynamic, very punchy, very upfront, super engaging. Some people might find it fatiguing. It does kind of assault your senses, but in a good way. And if you can get these at the early bird price, $129, I think that's an absolute steal, and you definitely should do that. However, at the recommended retail price of $199, I think there's still a good buy for that, but then I would also recommend looking at other alternatives in the price range. They don't stand head and shoulders above everything else around that $200 mark, but I think they do perform on par with pretty much everything in that price. Hope that makes sense. I'm really thirsty now after all this talking, so I'm going to go get a drink. I'm going to wrap up the video too, so thanks for watching. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, PAR Family Audiophile style. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button before you go, and until next time, I'll see you later.